The next time you feel like complaining about your neighborhood, remember that some folks live inside a volcano crater. You can see their village on Google Maps when you look at the most beautiful island of Madagascar. There's an almost perfectly round dark spot on the map. Roads are running on both sides of it, but don't cross it. When you zoom in enough, you'll see a village with houses sitting in the middle of a crater. The nearest marked town is 5 miles away from it. You could think it's some tribe that's lived there for centuries and wouldn't move no matter what. But as you look at the maps from previous years, you can see it's not shrinking, but growing. The first houses appeared here in 2008. So, why would someone living in the 21st century willingly relocate to such a well-hidden and isolated location? This question was bothering the team of Vox, an American news website. They decided to solve the mystery with zero data available on the unusual village. The first logical step was to find someone local and just ask them about what was going on behind the crater walls. It was tricky from the start, as some places marked on Google around the area turned out to be fake and inspired by manga. The real places didn't have any contact information. Then, they reached out to an organization that had some pictures on Instagram posted from the nearest town. They responded, but it didn't help at all as they had never been near the mountain in question. So, the journalists decided to try and reach out to experts in agriculture and biogeography work who might have connections in the region. It was obvious at that point that a simple Google search or a couple of messages wouldn't help. So, they decided to ask someone based in Madagascar to go and see the place. The mystery chasers got in touch with the head of a local video production company. She was surprised that someone would live in that area because of earthquakes, but agreed to get a crew and travel around 85 miles from the capital of Madagascar to the village. They set the expedition date for January, in the middle of the rainy season. The closer they got to the location, the worse the roads became. At some point, they had to change from the car to motorbikes and finally walk to their destination for an hour. A storm interrupted their plans. They had to go back before it would become impossible to pass on the slippery terrain. For safety reasons, they decided to postpone their expedition until the end of the rainy season in May. In the 4 months between the two expeditions, the Vox team decided to learn more about the mysterious location. It turned out that the mountain dated back to the Cretaceous period, and it was volcanic. An expert explained that the mountain we see today must be 90 million years old, older than Mount Everest and the Grand Canyon. So, the volcano that was sitting here was long extinct. The massif surrounding the crater is a huge alkaline ring complex. It was once a thriving village because of its elevated position and access to fresh water. The soil here is really fertile thanks to the alkaline chemicals in it. As the rainy season was over, the local crew was ready for another attempt to solve the mystery of the village inside the crater. This time, the weather and the roads were perfect, but there was a new problem. As they reached the village, the locals weren't too thrilled to see them. Finally, the leader of the Big Island Village, that's how its name translates, agreed to show them around. It turned out there were about 50 houses in the village and 300 people, all belonging to the Betsilio ethnic group. When their hometown became overcrowded, they knew it was time to look for a new home. One of the village elders knew this could be the new location. He traded cattle in the area and remembered this wide-open, empty space. So they traveled around 240 miles from their old home to their new crater village. They grow cash crops, mostly lemons and oranges, and sell them at the markets in neighboring cities. Transporting goods is challenging because the roads leading to and around the village aren't in the best condition. The volcanic mountain witnessed the separation of Madagascar from India around 88 million years ago. Ever since, the island has been isolated from the rest of the world, and the result of this loneliness is a unique flora and fauna. There are 40 species of lemurs you won't find anywhere else on Earth. All hail King Julian, if you know what I mean. Plus, there are about 800 species of butterflies. 92% of Madagascar's mammals, 89% of its plant life, and 95% of its reptiles can only be found here. So, if you want to meet creatures like the giraffe weevil, the panther chameleon, the tomato frog, the adorable predator fossa, cute lemurs like the sifaka or the indri, and many other cool animals, you have to travel here. Scientists have three major theories on how the beautiful diversity of land animals made it to the island. First up, some species might have been chilling on Madagascar before it even became an island. Second theory, they swam or rafted their way from mainland Africa when the currents were feeling generous. Lastly, there's the land bridge idea. The problem is that there is hardly any fossil record in Madagascar between the time of the dinosaurs and about 2,000 years ago. In a new study, researchers compared the genes of modern-day Madagascar species with their mainland African relatives, trying to figure out when each animal's ancestors hitched a ride to the island. It turned out that some species in Madagascar have been there for over 80 million years and have seen the island split from the Indian subcontinent. It means that creatures like the big-headed turtle survived the dinosaur extinction event 66 million years ago. But most of the reptiles, mammals, and amphibians opted for a more adventurous journey. They descended from smaller animals that likely rafted their way to Madagascar. Lemurs, for example, probably had tiny ancestors, like the mouse lemurs. Tortoises might have just floated across the Mozambique Channel without needing a raft to get to their destination. The first humans settled here just around 1,300 years ago. The island's name is still a bit of a linguistic mystery. Legend has it that Marco Polo, the famous Venetian merchant, gave it the name after getting his geography a bit mixed up. He confused it with the kingdom of Mogadishu in East Africa, did some mispronunciation, and voila, Madagascar was born. Despite the uncertainty in its name's origin, language and culture point straight to Indonesia. Some scholars argue that the first settlers came here straight from Indonesia, with African influences sprinkled in later through migration. Others think it was a mix of several voyages along the coasts of India, the Arabian Peninsula, and Africa, creating a diverse melting pot. Most people on the island speak Malagasy, the national language, which is based on the Latin alphabet. French is also widely spoken and is officially recognized. If you're using vanilla on a regular basis, chances are that it comes from Madagascar. The island supplies around 80% of the world's natural vanilla, and it makes 25% of the country's exports. They also sell clothing and textiles, cloves, fish and shellfish, and various food products overseas. They use most of the land to let their cattle wander and enjoy the juicy green grass. Some of the oldest villages used to be built on hilltops surrounded by huge ditches for defense. But later, they've been rebuilt on lower grounds. It's more handy to do agriculture down there.
The Amazon River, the boat, and dense jungle on both sides. All is silent. Only the engine is revving, and you look around nervously under the earnest gaze of the Peruvian guide. Suddenly, the man smiles and points ahead. This is it. You've finally arrived at Iquitos. The city is hidden deep within the Amazon rainforest. On one side, Iquitos is surrounded by water, and on the other lies thick, impenetrable rainforest as far as the eye can see, making this city extremely difficult to reach. First, you had to fly to Peru's capital, Lima, a vibrant coastal city. From there, you traveled by bus through Peru's vast jagged mountains before being plunged into the heart of the Amazon rainforest. 3 days into this bus journey, you reached a small town where the road suddenly stopped. At over 140 square miles, Iquitos is the largest continental city in the world that cannot be reached by road. You're still over 200 miles away from Iquitos, so from here you take a boat ride along the hot, humid Amazon River before finally reaching the remote city 5 days after you left Lima. When you arrive in the city, you notice many of the houses are built on tall stilts. This is because, in the springtime, the river surrounding Iquitos swells up, submerging parts of the city in water. For this, Iquitos has been nicknamed the Venice of the Amazon. The stilted houses are tall enough to avoid the murky waters of the Amazon River. You hear loud buzzing coming from all around the city. It sounds like a gang of bikers have arrived. In reality, these are motocarrios. There are very few cars in Iquitos. Instead, they have motorcycles with small passenger cabins attached to them. There are around 45,000 of these things whizzing around Iquitos, making the city very noisy. Your trip to the most isolated places has just begun. So, you head to Norway and arrive in the capital city Oslo. Immediately, you hop on another plane. After a 3-hour flight, you land at the world's northernmost public airport, Longyearbyen. You step off the plane to see a small and colorful town enclosed by snow-topped mountains. There's no settlement further to the north than this. Longyearbyen translates to the Long Year Town, named after its American founder, coal miner John Longyear. You take a walk along the coast of the small town. The water is a beautiful crystal blue. You decide to dip your toe in to test it out. Ow! Bad idea. The average temperature of the water here is 32 degrees, making it ice cold. In the distance, you can make out a fuzzy white creature. It's a polar bear. In fact, it's a group of them. In Longyearbyen, polar bears famously outnumber humans. Around 3,000 of these animals populate the area compared to the human population of 2,300. Finally, the sun sets. You grab a blanket and sit back to take in the stunning view of the northern lights. Now, imagine you're walking in the scorching heat across Egypt's Great Sand Sea. You've been walking for miles, hours, days even, dreaming of water, greenery, and a place to rest, when suddenly you come across a small settlement with olive groves, palm trees, and even freshwater springs. This isn't a heat-induced mirage. It's the Siwa Oasis, an Egyptian city of 23,000 people and a miracle of nature. You travel here by flying to Egypt's capital, Cairo, and then embarking on a lengthy and desolate bus ride across the desert. When you finally spot some greenery amongst the sand, you have reached the Siwa Oasis. After refreshing yourself in the cool waters of the springs, you explore the city further and come across ancient ruins. This city has existed since 10,000 BCE, and many historical remnants can still be found there today. Amongst these ruins, you notice there are newer buildings. These are where the modern-day Siwi people live. You spend some time with the Siwi, a friendly and unique community of Egyptians. They tell you all about their city. The Siwa Oasis is located in the middle of the Sahara Desert, and due to its harsh climate, it's one of the most remote cities in the world. You notice how dry the air is and how scorching the sun feels. Reaching highs of 118 degrees Fahrenheit, this heat makes the Siwa Oasis a difficult place to live. It's time to travel to a more balanced climate. You head northeast and arrive in Russia's capital, Moscow. From there, you take a flight east again, traveling further and further across Russia until you're closer to Alaska than to Moscow. You've reached the city of Petropavlovsk, which translates to City of Peter and Paul. The first thing you see are giant mountains surrounding the city, cutting it off from the rest of the world. These mountains are in fact volcanoes. In this far eastern part of Russia, there are more than 300 volcanoes, including 29 active ones. These volcanoes stop any roads from reaching Petropavlovsk. The city depends on flights and boats to import supplies. You turn away from the volcanoes to stare out at the blue, shimmering ocean. The water looks nice, so you head down to the beach where a crowd of sea lions are sunbathing along the sand. Petropavlovsk is home to incredibly diverse wildlife. Just off the shore, you can see a whale fin poking out of the water. You explore the city's diverse landscape. You go to one of the city's ski resorts and spend the day on the slopes. Then you hike up a rocky path to the base of one of the city's many volcanoes. Finally, it's time to relax on a boat tour around the island to see the city's famous Three Brothers rock formation. Feeling inspired, you travel to another volcanic land, Chile's Easter Island. The island doesn't have a harbor and only one airline flies to the remote land, so you travel an entire day to Santiago, Chile. Then you climb aboard a small plane to fly to Easter Island. You walk among the high cliffs of the barren island and come across its famous monuments. These are giant, mysterious statues of human heads. They're called moai and were carved by the local people around 800 years ago. You inspect the earth beneath your feet. It looks and feels very dry. Easter Island consists of 3 ancient volcanoes. The volcanic soil makes it very difficult to grow crops or vegetation. Some of the city's trees were cleared hundreds of years ago to make way for the stone monuments, giving the island the empty look it has today. You embark on a boat ride 1,100 miles west from Easter Island. You reach a small green land floating in the Pacific Ocean. This is Pitcairn Island. You might recall that this place played a major role in the mutiny on the Bounty. You come down from the boat and begin your journey to reach Adamstown, the center of the island where its 43 inhabitants live. To reach Adamstown, you hike the Hill of Difficulty, a steep and rocky 200-foot climb to the top of the island. Now that you've finally made it here, you can explore the diverse and unique nature of the land. Pitcairn Island is home to the largest marine reserve in the world. You take a snorkeling trip and swim alongside all kinds of exotic fish. You explore vibrant coral reefs and even catch sight of a rare humpback whale. Dreaming of the great days of the old Wild West, you decide to travel to Supai, Arizona. To get to this Native American settlement and fragment of the past, you drive along America's famous Route 66. You stop, seemingly in the middle of nowhere with only desert land as far as the eye can see. Then you follow an 8-mile walking trail to reach Supai. You hike down into the Grand Canyon, almost 3,000 feet deep. You come across a stunning waterfall spilling over the cliffs of the canyon. This is Havasu Falls, a popular tourist spot, famous for its vivid blue-green water. After a further mile's hike, you finally reach Supai. Over 200 members of the Havasupai Indian tribe reside in the small town. It's often referred to as the most remote town in the United States. To your left, you see several mules making their way across town with packages on their backs. Because no roads lead to this small settlement, mail is delivered by a mule train. Without it, it would take the average mail carrier a 16-hour hike to complete this route. You walk around the area and come across many more towering blue waterfalls. The untouched nature and great views of the Grand Canyon make the long hike worthwhile. After a beautiful sunset, nighttime falls, and there are no lights for miles. The land is lit up by the countless stars shining overhead. Hundreds of thousands of years ago, rivers of volcanic lava rushed through what is now Spain. With time, it turned to rock and formed a crag over the abyss. Back in the Middle Ages, someone decided to build a village on that basaltic rock between the rivers Fluvia and Torinel. They named it Castelfolle de la Rocca. You can see it from the distance, and from sunset till midnight, the cliffs are illuminated, making it look even more like a mysterious medieval castle. The village is shorter than a mile and is made up of narrow, shadowy streets and little squares that all blend into one main artery. Most of the buildings here are made of the same material as the pedestal the village stands on. It's all volcanic rocks. The place is so tightly pressed together, it feels like one wrong step and you'd fall into the abyss. The village has the only working basalt quarry in Spain. The tallest building in the village is the St. Salvador Church. It has a history dating back to the 13th century and was rebuilt many times. This is one of the smallest towns in Catalonia, with a population of just around 1,000 people. Yet, it has 2 museums. One of them is history-themed, and the other one is Museum of Cured Meats. That's right, you can learn the history of meat making and taste local specialties for free. The town of Manawee, USA, has a mayor, a clerk, a treasurer, a librarian, a tavern keeper, and a bartender. Yet the population is still just 1. Elsie Eiler has been doing all those jobs, paying taxes to herself and voting herself for mayor since 2004. Back in the 1930s, Manawee had a population of 150 people, with working grocery shops and restaurants. When farming conditions got worse, people started leaving, family by family. Till now, there's just 1. Hey, you can save some good money on ceilings and back walls in this Spanish town. 3,000 locals live under and in the sides of Cadiz Mountains and use them as natural backup. The first settlers moved in here in the prehistoric times. The rocks are perfect for keeping cool in the summer and warm in the winter. The Australian town of Coober Pedy is famous for precious opals found here and for its underground residence built from old abandoned mines. Back in the day, the miners could hardly work under the burning desert sun. So, someone decided to put a tent directly in the mine. Later, it turned into a home. Now, there are 3 churches, a bookstore, an art gallery, a bar, and hotels with swimming pools underground. Moroccan Chefchaouen has become famous worldwide for its blue houses. The town was founded to stand against an outside invasion in the 15th century and was originally white. Some people believe it was painted blue to symbolize the skies, others to repel mosquitoes and prevent the spread of malaria. In either case, the locals are proud of it and regularly add a new layer of blue on their walls. Any cat lover in the world should put Aoshima, Japan on their bucket list. There are 6 times more cats than people on this cat island, with just about 15 humans and over 100 felines living there. There are no restaurants, hotels, or even cars in Aoshima. Tourists just come here for the purrs. If you were more of a bunny person, you gotta love another Japanese island, Okunoshima, also known as the Rabbit Island in Seto Inland Sea. They say some boy let 8 rabbits run free on the island in 1971, and the number quickly grew to 700 over the following years. You can also enjoy hot springs, beaches, and cycling here. Giethoorn Village is nicknamed Venice of the Netherlands, and it doesn't have a single road for cars. It's all about waterways, walking paths, bike trails, and little colorful houses. Its 2,000-something residents mostly live on private islands and have to cross one of the 180 bridges to go places. That or a popular whisper boat with a tiny silent engine not to ruin the romantic atmosphere. Every place is unique, unless it's a well-made Chinese replica. Thames Town is a good proof of that. It was finished in 2006 with faux Victorian and faux Tudor buildings, fish and chip places, and red phone booths everywhere. The place is super popular for UK-themed wedding photo shoots. You can also find a replica of an Austrian village of Hallstatt, the Sphinx, the Eiffel Tower, and Venetian canals, all within China. The entire town of Whittier, Alaska, lives under one roof of a 14-story building of a former military barracks. That's 200 people, plus all the shops, a police station, a post office, a hospital, and a church. The idea behind all this is to save money on heating in the always cold climate and let the people have everything they need in one place. This way, they don't have to face the strong winds outside. Residents and tourists in Miyakijima, a Japanese island in the Philippine Sea, never leave home without a gas mask. The place sits at the base of an active volcano, and there are always high levels of dangerous sulfur gas in the air. Ooh, that must smell good. Kidding. The locals are paid by the government to live here, and the tourists come for scuba diving and to watch dolphins and rare birds. Another dangerous place to live is in Pennsylvania. Centralia used to be a big coal mining center. Then somebody decided to do a landfill cleanup that led to a fire, and it's been burning for decades now. That and the sinkholes in the area turned the place into a ghost town with about 5 original brave residents left. The Italian village of Viganella was built right at the bottom of a deep valley and on the wrong side of the mountains. They cast a huge shadow and deprived the village of the sun for the entire winter. The locals used to live like that for centuries, until one engineer decided to build a large mirror high on the opposite slope of the mountain. It's operated by a computer and reflects light on the central square of Viganella for at least 6 hours a day during the darkest months. The name of this town, which I can't pronounce, translates to oil rocks and is located entirely in the open sea on the world's first offshore oil platform. Its population of around 5,000 regularly changes. People come here in shifts for a few months. It has legit hotels, bakeries, recreation centers, and whatever else you'd expect to find in a regular town. Its future is unclear though. Once the oil reserves end, it will not likely stay afloat. The Japanese town of Nagoro is known as Scarecrow Village. The last children were born here over 20 years ago. It officially has less than 50 residents, but it feels complete thanks to 350 life-size human dolls. When a local lady came back here in 2000 to look after her aging father, she saw the empty streets, shops, and schools. To change that, she and her friends started making cute dolls to replace the residents. If you're looking for the most relaxed place in the world, you could try the villages in Florida. 2 important conditions to move here are: 1. There must be at least one person over 55 in your home, and 2. You have to leave behind any family members under 19. The most popular means of transport in the villages is a golf cart. There are all sorts of fun, free activities for the residents, so it's far from being boring. There are many places around the world where people live in caves in the side of mountains. Matmata in southern Tunisia stands out because the local Berbers make their own caves of sandstone. They've been digging large pits in the ground and then smaller caves for rooms inside for 1,000 years. Many locals still prefer this traditional housing option, even though there are more conventional houses on the surface. There's a village in India that gets more rainfall than any other place in the world. To adapt and survive somehow, the people of Mawsynram have learned to build natural living bridges that are made of rubber tree roots and don't rot as much as usual wooden structures. Those who work outside wear full-body umbrellas made of bamboo and banana leaves. So, you've just finished your sightseeing tour of Edinburgh, Scotland, or Scotland. It lasted just under an hour, and you're hungry for more. You ask your guide if there's anything else to see, and they start talking about a mysterious underground city. You ask how long it takes to get there, and you're shocked by the guide's answer. You're standing on it. It's right under your feet. South Bridge? But you were just there and didn't notice a giant arrow pointing down. So this is where the mystery starts. The story begins in the mid-1700s. The Scottish capital wasn't as big as it is today. Only 60,000 people lived around Edinburgh Castle. All of them were packed inside medieval walls, and they say today's cities are overpopulated. Get a load of the living conditions back then. The buildings were tall, so there was little natural light. Some houses had 14 stories. Cows walked the narrow winding streets and left stock. Things were so bad that the famous English writer Daniel Defoe noted, "I believe that in no city in the world so many people have so little room." Yep, that's the guy who wrote Robinson Crusoe. Well, something just had to be done. The solution was to build 2 long bridges to the north and to the south of the city. The names they gave the bridges were more descriptive than colorful. The bridge to the north was completed first. In 1785, construction on the second bridge got underway. It was going to connect the main pedestrian street in the north with the university buildings in the south of Edinburgh. But don't think of this construction as a modern bridge over a river. It was more of a viaduct, a type of bridge that connects 2 hills across a valley. The word viaduct comes from Latin, as Romans were pioneers in building these structures. Their capital was built on 7 hills. And just to be copycats, Edinburgh also straddled 7 major hills. Only 2 are visible today because the city has been built up. Now, back in the 18th century, the construction of the South Bridge was a remarkable feat of engineering. It took the builders only 3 years to complete it. 19 stone arches spanned a chasm that was 31 feet at its deepest point, and the length over 1,000 feet. Impressive, even for today's standards. But what does a 2.5 centuries old viaduct have to do with an underground city? Well, it is the city. You see, they designed Southbridge to be hollow on the inside. As you walk along this street today, there is actually a huge human-made cave beneath your feet. The popular name for this set of chambers is the Edinburgh Vaults. But what was the purpose of this space? And is there something or someone there now? Well, let's take it one step at a time. The builder's original intention was for these vaults to serve as merchant shops. At first, it worked out fine. Merchants used a total of 120 vaults as shops and warehouses. There were workshops, cobblers, and taverns. But as time went by, a major design flaw came to light. The stone was leaking, and the vaults were damp all the time. There was even flooding. The builders forgot to waterproof the structure. The merchants feared the water would damage their precious goods. After just a couple of years, the first tenants started moving out. Once legal trade moved away from the vaults, the city's poor moved in. And not only them, but all sorts of shady characters. Historians don't know much about this period, since there are no written records. But even the squatters had to leave soon. If you couldn't do business in these vaults, how could you live in them? It was damp and cold, and there was no ventilation, sanitation, or natural light. It really stunk. Every real estate agent's worst nightmare. Just 30 years after their completion, the Southbridge vaults were abandoned once and for all. But at a street level, business was as usual. The officials decided to fill the vaults with rubble for security purposes. Buried and forgotten, the memory of a once teeming merchant quarter of Edinburgh slowly faded from people's minds. Now, this is where the story gets a bit weird. During the 1980s, a Scottish rugby player accidentally found a tunnel leading into the vaults. The athlete didn't waste any time and started excavating the vaults with the help of his son. Several tons of rubble, and a decade later, the Southbridge vaults have been restored to their former glory, so to speak. They were again dark and damp as they were back in the 1700s. There were many interesting finds in this underground city. The vaults were littered with oyster shells, which were the standard diet for a working-class resident of Edinburgh at the time. Other finds, such as shoes and empty bottles, suggested that people actually lived in these claustrophobic vaults. Think of this the next time you see someone trying to rent their garage as an apartment. So, your guide was right. There really is a hidden city under the streets of Edinburgh. Well, at least one street. You have now gone down from the main pedestrian street into Cowgate. You look up and there it is, the only visible arch of the once impressive bridge. You are now searching online to book a tour of the vaults. You just have to see this place with your own eyes. But the Scottish capital isn't the only city with a mysterious underground. The historic region of Cappadocia in central Turkey hides no less than 36 cities beneath the ground. The biggest and the most impressive one wasn't discovered until 1963. It was built during the Byzantine era to protect the local population from invaders. We have similar structures made out of concrete in our cities, but the level of the Turkish underground city is really impressive. There are several levels, like in a multi-story car garage. The caves and tunnels lie 197 feet underground. That's 2/3 of the Statue of Liberty's height. The city could house 20,000 people at any given time, complete with livestock and food. The smell. Anyway, 20,000 is the average attendance at Major League Soccer matches today. You might want to add a field trip to one of these places the next time you go to Turkey. Most of these cities in Cappadocia can be found in rural areas. Makes sense, right? After all, they were dug out as hiding places. But in Europe, there is one city whose underground labyrinth resembles the vaults of Edinburgh. You've probably heard of Pilsen in the Czech Republic. But hold on a second, this isn't going to be a story of the most famous local product. Something brewed, perhaps? It's the story of a medieval city that survived underneath the streets of Pilsen. Water wells, cellars, and passageways stretch for more than 12 miles. Merchants and craftspeople used Pilsen's historical underground for storage. Water, food, ice, you name it. The waterworks are pretty impressive. Historians estimate that 360 wells are located under Pilsen's historical town center. In times of instability, the passageways served as safe havens for the locals. They definitely didn't go thirsty down there. Today, most tourists visit these mysterious underground cities. But in Canada, there's one where people live and work. The construction of Montreal's underground city began in 1962. The initial idea was to shelter traffic. That's a nice way to say that city officials were building a metro station. The idea caught on, and the project expanded. Now, it's a real-life urban maze hidden under the downtown area. Need a place to stay? There are hotels down there. Want to grab a bite? Step into one of the underground restaurants. Multiple shops, a library, cinemas, the list is long. There are even residential complexes. But how can people live under the ground? Simple. Although the city itself lies beneath the earth, the access points are at ground level. You can enter the 20-mile-long tunnel network at more than 120 places. Oh, that's another place down under. Oops, sorry, Australia.
If you've ever wondered what it feels like to walk on diamonds, head straight to the town of Nördlingen in Germany. It seems like a typical fairy tale village with cute houses and red roofs, but its walls and streets are actually studded with over 72,000 diamonds. You'll need a microscope to see them, but they're definitely there. When the first people came to live here, somewhere around the 9th century CE, they were positive they were settling down in a volcanic crater. They didn't know the stone they were using for construction was embedded with millions of tiny diamonds, and the origins of the crater were out of this world. An asteroid slightly larger than half a mile in diameter hit our planet around 14.5 million years ago in what is now Bavaria and left a crater 16 miles wide. The bedrock was under such intense heat and pressure that the bubbles of carbon inside transformed into tiny diamonds at a concentration like nowhere else in the world. The locals didn't pay attention to their houses, built of what was left of that asteroid impact, shimmering on sunrise. Then, in the 1960s, 2 geologists arrived from the USA, studied the landscape from a distance, and noticed it didn't look exactly like a volcanic crater. After further research, they realized their theory that the crater was shaped from above and not from below proved right. They even had to change school books after the discovery, not to mislead the students. Once the word of the crater had spread, NASA got interested in it and sent their Apollo 14 and Apollo 16 astronauts to visit it to learn about what kind of rocks they'd find in space and which of them were worth bringing home. A moon rock that arrived with one of the missions is now on display at the local museum, and astronauts still visit the place. The locals, though, are so used to living among diamonds, they don't even find it special. The Australian town of Coober Pedy is known as the opal capital of the world and exists completely underground. The town even has the first 4-star underground hotel in the world. The reason people settled in this area was to work at an opal mine. Back in the day, the miners could hardly survive under the burning desert sun, so someone decided to put a tent directly into the mine. Then it turned into a home. Now, Coober Pedy has around 2,500 residents from different countries, about 30 shops, an opal gallery, museums, a bar, and other buildings, and is a popular tourist attraction. The town of Monowi, Nebraska, in the USA, has a mayor, a clerk, a treasurer, a librarian, a tavern keeper, and a bartender. Yet, the population is officially just 1. Elsie Eiler has been doing all those jobs, paying taxes to herself, and voting herself for mayor since 2004. Back in the 1930s, Monowi had a population of 150 people, grocery shops, and restaurants. When farming conditions got worse, people started leaving family by family until it went down to 1 person. If you feel like saving some money on house construction, look up some property in the Spanish town of Centenil de las Bodegas. 3,000 residents live under and into the sides of the Cadiz Mountains and use them as natural walls and ceilings. The first settlers moved in here back in prehistoric times. The rocks keep the houses cool in the summer and warm in the winter. Neft Dashleri in Azerbaijan was built as an oil platform in 1940, directly in the Caspian Sea. Once they discovered rich oil deposits, it started growing and is now made up of a network of platforms with around 5,000 people working and living here. The town has apartments, bridges, a library, a community center, and even a movie theater. The Japanese village of Nagoro has an unofficial second name, the Scarecrow Village. The last children were born here over 20 years ago. It officially has less than 50 residents, but it feels complete thanks to 350 life-size human dolls. When a local lady came back here in 2000 to look after her aging father, she saw the empty streets, shops, and schools. To change that, she and her friends started making cute dolls to replace the residents. The entire town of Whittier, Alaska, lives under one roof of a 14-story building of a former barracks. That's around 220 people who live here all year round, plus all the shops, a police station, a post office, a hospital, and a church. The locals are mostly working in commercial fishing, recreation, and tourism, or for the state ferry and railroad. The idea behind having everyone and everything in one place is to save money on heating in the always cold climate and let the people do all their business inside. This way, they don't have to face the unbearably strong winds. There's a town in Svalbard, Norway called Longyearbyen, where the sun sets on October 25th and doesn't rise again for the next 4 months. When it rises again in spring, the locals gather on the step of an old hospital at 12:15 to welcome the sun and celebrate its return. Then, it doesn't set for over 4 months. It happens because of the way the Earth is tilted on its axis. The sun only rises and sets once each year at the North and South Poles. Longyearbyen is the northernmost town in the world, so it gets affected by that. Its residents occasionally see polar bears and reindeer in the streets and get around on snowmobiles. The Italian village of Viganella was built right at the bottom of a deep valley and on the wrong side of the mountains. They cast huge shadows and deprived the village of the sun for the entire winter. The locals used to live like that for centuries, until one engineer decided to build a large mirror high on the opposite slope of the mountain. It's operated by a computer and reflects light on the central square of Viganella for at least 6 hours a day during the darkest months. Santa Cruz del Islote in Colombia is one of the world's most crowded islands, with around 600 residents in a 2.5-acre area. Fishermen built this island on a coral platform over a century ago. They chose it because of its beautiful location and the absence of mosquitoes. The families of the original settlers were growing, and most of them never left the island. You'll only find people with 6 different last names living here. When the family needs extra space, they just add an extra floor to one of around 100 homes in town. Now it has a school, shops, a church, and 1 restaurant. There is no traffic, since the streets aren't wide enough for cars or trucks, and the distances are perfectly walkable. No one on the island locks their doors, because everyone knows each other, and there hasn't been a single crime. Another place where people don't lock their doors is the Shani Shingnapur village in India. In fact, local homes and even shops don't have front doors, keys, and locks, but locals never feel unsafe. Residents believe their village is under the protection of Lord Shani, who will punish anyone who tries to steal something. A legend says that around 300 years ago, after heavy rain and flooding, the locals found a huge rock. The same night, Lord Shani appeared in the dreams of the village head and promised to protect the village if they kept the rock in the village unsheltered. The deity would live on the rock and oversee the village. Once the first bank opened in the village, they added a glass entrance and a barely visible electromagnetic lock with a remote control to respect the tradition. If you're looking for the most relaxed place in the world, check out the Villages in Florida. You can't move here unless there is at least one person over 55 in your home. And you'd have to leave behind any family members under 19. The most popular means of transportation in the Villages is a golf cart. There are all sorts of free fun activities for the residents, so it's far from boring.
Welcome to Know, a small town located in the south of Seward Peninsula on the west coast of Alaska. If you live here, I'll bet you say there's no place like Nome. Well, maybe not. It's cold and snowy here, and no roads connect this town with other settlements. And with the onset of night, locals have disappeared here without a trace. Perhaps that's why only 3,500 people live here. Well, let's investigate this case. People disappear in cities for assorted reasons, but it was Nome who attracted the attention of the public. From 1960 to 2004, some 24 people went missing there. That number is statistically too big for such a small population. People just didn't come home in the morning, and no one knew what had happened to them. All the locals in small towns like Nome know each other. There are almost no strangers here, as it's difficult to get to Nome. There are no roads and no ferry crossing. All roads from Nome break off and lead to beautiful natural landscapes unspoiled by human mammals. You can get there and back by plane. And this is not some passenger jet, but a small biplane. Another way to get there is by snowmobile. By the way, Nome is the ultimate point of the famous dog sled race, the Iditarod. Also, you can pay locals from neighboring villages and towns to bring you to Nome by motorboat. But despite this, the town has become quite famous. The frequent disappearance of people finally got needed attention. The whole world found out about Nome, and in 2009, Hollywood even made a movie about it. For a long time, no one could solve the mystery. The police had no clues, no witnesses, nothing. There are long, cold nights here in winter, and the air becomes so cold that a glass of water freezes in minutes. Snow can fall constantly. Therefore, if someone leaves the town at night, snow will sweep all traces away by the morning. Of course, people began to come up with their own theories. The most popular one was about someone who took people away by force. The police didn't find any evidence that some person could do it. So, if it's not a human, it could be some beast. And again, police found no evidence to support this version. After that, people started thinking that creatures from other planets caused these disappearances. Many locals were sure that the town was a popular destination for extraterrestrial spaceships. The plot of the Hollywood movie The Fourth Kind was based on this version. More time passed. Finally, the police and the FBI launched a large-scale investigation, and they uncovered the truth. They realized that the stories about missing people were exaggerated. The popularity of Nome and the constant talk about fantastic things made people believe in the reality of these versions. Now, let's assume that some of the appearances were made up. But still, many people are gone. What about them? The answer is bars and harsh weather. Entertainment venues are open at night. Some locals have fun, leave the bar, and go home. At this moment, a heavy snowstorm begins. Visibility drops to zero, and the strong wind knocks you down. This way, a person might simply get lost. And that's it. The truth turned out stranger than most versions. The Bermuda Triangle is a big area in the Atlantic Ocean, so the disappearance of ships and planes there seems not so surprising. But it's much creepier when it happens on a lake. Let's visit the Lake Michigan Triangle. It's located between Michigan and Wisconsin. For a couple of centuries, terrible things have been happening here. People put the same legends around this place as around the Bermuda Triangle. They reported unexplained phenomena and saw flying objects above the lake's surface. Some believe that the triangle is a time portal. Of course, no theories have been confirmed, but strange cases have occurred on the triangle territory. One happened in 1950, when a Northwest Airlines plane with 108 passengers disappeared without a trace during a flight over the lake. Police officers saw a red light over the lake 2 hours after the plane's last communication. The aircraft probably crashed, but rescuers didn't find any passengers or wreckage. All that's left was just an oil stain on the water. Many ships and boats disappeared there, but one of the strangest cases occurred on April 28, 1937. It was midnight. One ship was sailing through this lake. Captain George Donner went to sleep in his cabin after a hard day's work. 3 hours later, the vessel was approaching the port. One of the crew members went to the captain's cabin to wake him up. The door was locked from the inside. The assistant knocked, but no one answered. When he suspected that something had happened to the captain, the assistant unlocked the door. He got into the cabin, but there was no captain there. He seemed to have disappeared into thin air. The crew couldn't find him. Since then, the eerie disappearance of Captain George Donner remains unexplained. Meet David Paulides. In 2008, he finished his career as a police officer and began to study the mysterious disappearance of people in Europe, the USA, and Canada. He found out that most people went missing in the U.S. national parks. Over the past 150 years, more than 1,100 tourists have vanished there. Many of them were experienced travelers who knew how to survive in harsh wild conditions. David has written about these mysterious vanishings. He pointed out that some of them didn't disappear, but were found alive. They woke up somewhere in the forest and didn't remember what had happened to them. The creepy detail of all these cases is that most missing persons were young. Another detail is that many went missing before hurricanes. There are too many riddles and not enough answers in this case. Then there's the Sargasso Sea in the northern part of the Atlantic Ocean. This is the only sea that doesn't have shores on land. It's called the sea only because it's defined by ocean currents. Also, golden brown algae grow in this area's bottom, making it seem like an orange spot in the middle of the endless ocean. The Sargasso Sea became famous because, in the 19th century, one of the most famous phantom ships in history sailed here. In 1872, a brigantine sailed through the Sargasso Sea. Its captain spotted another ship a few miles away. He lit a signal fire, but received no response. Then the captain decided to sail closer to find out what had happened. On the hull of the mysterious ship was the name Mary Celeste. The captain of the brigantine and several crew members went on board. They walked around the deck and looked into the cabins and the hold. Everything was in place, but there were no people. The cargo and barrels remained untouched, so pirates didn't attack the vessel. The only damaged thing on the ship were the sails. They were torn to shreds. All documents except the logbook were missing from the navigator's cabin. The last logbook entry was added on November 24, 1872. The crew of the ship was never found, and this was one of many cases. In the 20th century, from the 60s to the 80s, there were many reports of empty boats and yachts floating on the sea. Also, some entire ships disappeared without a trace. All these cases still remain a mystery. According to one version, the four-sided current forms water funnels. Whirlpools can quickly pull a ship into the depths of the sea. This explains the disappearance of boats. But what about cases when the vessel is still on the water without a crew? Sometimes these whirlpools can create wind vortices. They're like little tornadoes. What if these whirlwinds are powerful enough to throw people overboard and tear the sails? Yeah, the theory seems too fantastic. So, what do you think happened? It's one of the most famous Instagrammable spots in the world. There are pictures of people leaning on it or pretending to support it so it doesn't fall. There are even images of it looking like an intricate ice cream scoop. Of course, I'm talking about the Leaning Tower of Pisa, a famous Italian landmark. It always looks as if it's seconds away from toppling over. Located in the Italian city of Pisa, which would make sense, this construction is better known for its precarious posture rather than its history or purpose. Back in 1178, when the construction of the tower was still underway, people realized that the building was starting to lean over, and that was even before they had reached the third floor. They first blamed the architect, whose left leg was shorter than his right by 2 inches and had a built-in lean. But no, I just made that up. They soon figured out that this was happening because of the soft soil beneath the tower. It soon became obvious that starting construction on top of soil made of clay, fine sand, and shells wasn't a promising idea. Centuries went by. Soon, people understood that the 180-foot-tall tower wasn't merely leaning, it was falling in slow-mo, and at an alarming rate of 0.08 of an inch per year. Now that may not sound like a lot, but multiply that by hundreds of years and, well, you can just look at the pictures. These days, the Leaning Tower is more than 16 feet off its perpendicular axis. It's not toppling over, only because its center of gravity continues to fall within the base of the structure. Plus, it's constantly monitored by local authorities. Now, since I've already got you excited for your next trip to Italy, you should know that the Leaning Tower of Pisa isn't the only crooked building in the country. About 2 hours away from Pisa, up north in the city of Bologna, there's not one but two leaning constructions, le due torri, which sounds better than the two towers. Now these towers were each named for the families that funded their construction, the Azianelli family and the Garasenda family. Because of its tilt, the Garasenda Tower is no longer open for visitors. The Azianelli Tower, however, can still offer tourists a wonderful view of the city. That is, if you manage to finish climbing almost 500 steps. It does come with a catch for students, though. Italians have a local superstition saying those who climb the tower up to the top will never be able to finish their studies. Well, that's certainly a disincentive. Now, Londoners have their own tilted tower, but it's probably not the one you may think about. Yup, it's the famous Big Ben or Elizabeth Tower. That's its official name, by the way. Big Ben is just the bell. Luckily, it's not leaning to one side as fast as other more impressively crooked buildings. It's currently tilting at a rate of 0.3 inches per year. This whole tilting thing is happening mostly because of several infrastructure projects, like the expansion of the London Underground or the construction of parking lots near this historic building. Locals are not that concerned, though. If the latest data is correct, it'll take Elizabeth Tower about 4,000 years to catch up with its Italian counterpart, the Tower of Pisa. Anyway, there's a strangely shaped building in Poland as well. It's called the Little Crooked House. You can find it in Sopot, Poland. Its construction was finished in 2004. This building looks like it just jumped out of a fairy tale. And no wonder. The architects behind this project claimed they had been inspired by books illustrated by Jan Schanzer. This project has a lot of striking details. For example, warped walls, sandstone frame windows, and stone decorations. The building also features curved tinted glass windows and a concave roof. As a popular tourist attraction in Poland, the Little Crooked House currently has a lot of shops, offices, and restaurants. Now, you don't have to travel all the way to Europe to check out tilting buildings. The Millennium Tower, located in the city of San Francisco, is leaning, sinking, and sliding. Either they've signed the building up for dance classes, or there's something wrong with it, don't you think? The biggest issue with the Millennium Tower apparently has to do with the 60 to 90 foot long friction piles that support it. They appear to have been driven into the sandy upper soil rather than the bedrock, which is 200 feet further down. Since the building is placed on land that can soon become too mushy, the solution might be to anchor the construction down to the bedrock. The current plan is to add a bunch of piles to help reduce the weight of the building's foundation. Surprisingly, in 2017, the inspection carried out by the local authorities confirmed that the building was still within safety requirements. There was some damage to the foundation and electrical system, though. But not all leaning structures are tilted as a result of an engineering mistake. The Capitol Gate Tower in Abu Dhabi, for example, is a 520-foot-tall skyscraper that leans almost 18 degrees to the west. It even made it to the Guinness World Records in 2010 as the world's furthest-leaning human-made tower. The engineering effort spent on it is impressive, to say the least. The angle of the tower is evened out by the world's first pre-cambered core. That's a fancy way of saying that loads of concrete was mixed with steel, and 490 piles going nearly 100 feet into the soil were added to the construction. Another modern and inclined architectural design is that of the Tower of Montreal, part of the city's Olympic Stadium, which is currently the tallest leaning building. It's over 575 feet tall. The Gate of Europe in Madrid consists of a couple of impressive twin towers, 374 feet tall and inclined at about 15 degrees. Well, we're heading back to Europe to the City of Love. Before visiting Paris, don't forget to check out the Sinking House or Tilting House. Trust me, it's a place not a lot of people know about, and it's a great location for spectacular pictures. It's quite easy to miss out since this construction isn't actually leaning. But if you angle your camera correctly, this quirky optical illusion will make your viewers think that you just visited a house that is halfway swallowed by the ground it stands on. Whoa! When you're in Montmartre, next to Sacré-Cœur, you'll see some steps. On the right-hand side, there's an orange house. And here's the trick. Because this house is located behind a pretty steep hill, all you need to do is rotate your camera at about 45 degrees to get the desired effect. Or you can take an even easier route and just edit the photo after you've taken it. There are cities in the world that are sinking right at this moment, some of them at an alarming rate. Probably the most worrying is the city of Venice. But if you ask a Venetian whether their city is sinking, they'll say, less than the sea is rising. Well, you got me there, pal. Under the city, there is sedimentary soil, which is still compacting and settling. That's why the problem here appears to be twofold. Not only did Venice sink about 9 inches in the past century, but the sea level also rises with each passing year. This makes this gorgeous region more prone to flooding. Even worse, during the colder season, the phenomenon called aqua alta, or high water, occurs. That's when an unusually high tide arrives together with strong winds and storms. In 1966, for example, one such storm raised the water in Venice to more than 6 feet above the usual level. One of the fastest sinking cities in the world is Jakarta, the capital of Indonesia, which is also one of the world's most populated locations. The process has been happening for decades, and if the current data is correct, over 95% of North Jakarta will be flooded by 2050. The northern part of the city has sunk a shocking 8 feet in 10 years, and now the rate is almost 10 inches per year. Jakarta is also sliding, in some locations at a rate of almost 6 inches each year. The rest of the city is sinking and sliding too, but at least it happens at a more moderate rate compared to other locations in the world. The main reason for this alarming process is the fact that there isn't a big enough water supply for the huge population of the city, over 10 million people as of 2020. Strangely enough, the city does have fresh water at its disposal. It has 300 days of rain per year and 13 rivers pass through it. The problem lies with the fact that this water cannot be stored, as Jakarta's wetlands have been turned into a concrete jungle. That's why people living in the city have to make their own wells to get fresh water. Continuously taking water from the ground leads to loads of empty underground space called subsidence. This leaves the city suspended on almost hollow ground, and eventually it will sink.
Have you ever wondered how cool buildings of the future are going to look? Well, hold on tight because artificial intelligence is here to revolutionize the world of architecture. AI is a great sidekick. It can give the architects incredible new tools to create mind-blowing structures that are not only stunning, but also eco-friendly and super efficient. So let's check what our beautiful future might look like. First of all, you know how cities can get crazy busy and overwhelming, right? Well, guess what? AI is here to save the day and make our cities super smart. Imagine you're cruising down the road in your flying car. Yes, we'll have those. Thanks to AI, the traffic flows like a dream. No more endless gridlock. The city knows where the most likely crime spots are and takes proactive steps to keep us safe. It's like having superheroes on every corner. And hey, forget about trash piling up. AI makes sure waste is managed efficiently, keeping our city clean and fresh. They can act as a city manager who can optimize everything from traffic to safety and even waste disposal. They can analyze tons of data from all sorts of places like sensors and social media. With all that information, they can help city planners make brilliant decisions that make our lives better. Okay, so you stroll down the street, and your eyes are instantly captivated by an extraordinary building. Its futuristic curves and features make it stand out from the rest. And it not only catches your eye, but also gives Mother Nature a high five. You might think it was designed by a genius architect, But little do you know it was actually a collaboration between humans and artificial intelligence. Imagine having a super smart design buddy who can whip up thousands of incredible building ideas in a blink of an eye. That's what AI-assisted design software does for architects. It can generate and assess a ton of design options. They take into account stuff like the best materials to use and the perfect placement for the building. Also, by analyzing data and crunching numbers, algorithms can help optimize the building's design. They can ensure it minimizes energy usage, conserves water, and manages waste like a pro. Every building strives to reduce costs, save energy, and promote a better world. The result? Architectural masterpieces that are both jaw-droppingly beautiful and super practical. The cityscape of the future will be dotted with these awe-inspiring structures. Oh, but that wasn't impressive enough for you? Well, how about a stunning, futuristic building that seems to defy gravity? It's not made of traditional bricks and mortar, oh no. This marvel was created using the powers of 3D printing. With the help of AI, architects designed every intricate detail and fed all the important data, like what materials to use and how the site conditions might affect the structure. AI algorithms worked their magic to optimize the design, making it both breathtakingly beautiful and rock solid. 3D printing is basically like having a magical machine that can create awesome structures straight out of a sci-fi movie, and AI jumps in to make sure these structures are not just pretty, but also strong. In the city of the future, 3D printing will become the ultimate architect's tool. It will allow them to create structures that were once impossible to build. From mind-bending shapes to intricate details, the possibilities are endless. But AI isn't just making buildings look great, it also makes them efficient and cozy. Let's say you step into a futuristic office building, and voila! The lights automatically adjust to match your mood, and the temperature is set perfectly for you. These futuristic buildings are capable of sensing and responding to their surroundings, just like you do. They control the lighting, keeping it just right for the time of day. They manage the temperature, so it's always cozy and comfortable. They even keep a watchful eye on security and fix small issues before they become big headaches. So, the smart building knows when people come and go, so it optimizes energy usage accordingly, saving the planet and some cash along the way. Now the cool thing is, all these aren't the only possibilities. How about turning skyscrapers into a vertical forest? Recently, an architect from India got super excited about the power of artificial intelligence. So, he decided to team up with an image bot called Midjourney to create a vision for the future. But instead of a dull, robotic world, they aimed for something spectacular. With text prompts like utopian technology and futuristic towers, the architect and AI got to work. Guess what? Midjourney didn't disappoint. It conjured up a world where buildings were covered in lush vertical forests and adorned with shapes inspired by nature. They wanted to create a sustainable future that harmonized with the environment. The architect, Manas Bhatia, is super positive about AI's potential. He doesn't see it as a threat to his job, but as a powerful tool for positive change. He envisions a future where architects and AI collaborate to make breathtaking designs. In his project, Bhatia even asked the AI to imagine symbiotic and hollowed structures, and it responded with pictures of apartments nestled within hollowed-out trees. Imagine a world where the building itself becomes a living, breathing part of nature. Well, Bhatia believes that nature should play a big role in architecture. He loves designing structures that embrace nature's beauty and functionality. From buildings built around trees to facades that regulate temperature, he's all about blending architecture with the natural world. With architects like Bhatia and the superpowers of AI, the future of cities is going to be amazing. So get ready to step into a world where nature and technology coexist in perfect harmony. It's a dream we can't wait to see come true. Or if you're not a big fan of trees, how about this? Skyscrapers that aren't made of solid bricks, but instead, they're inflatable wonders. Zumo, an architectural practice in Barcelona, used the magic of AI to bring these wobbly structures to life. These inflatable superstructures rise above future cities like illuminated balloons in the sky. Here's the best part. These inflatable buildings have sustainability superpowers. You can pump them up to towering heights, flatten them for easy transportation, and rebuild them wherever they're needed. Plus, they're powered by renewable energy, reducing their impact on the environment. Pretty cool, right? Phew. The future is zooming toward us like a rocket. Artificial intelligence can become the secret sauce that makes architects' work extra special. But hey, with great power comes great responsibility. We need to use AI wisely and ethically. For now, we don't have to worry about machines replacing architects. Artificial intelligence still needs a human hand, or else we might end up with buildings that look like mashed up bananas or ice cream cones, unless that's your thing. In addition, humans have one important advantage. They, well, are humans. We need to keep in mind that artificial intelligence doesn't have emotional intelligence. It's a brainy genius, but it can't fully understand the feelings and vibes we humans crave in our spaces. So, we must remember to infuse our designs with that human touch, those warm and fuzzy elements that make us go, "Ah, I feel right at home." And let's not forget that AI is still learning. It's basically just taking its first steps, and we need to be patient and give it time to grow. Rushing things too quickly could lead to wonky designs or buildings that look like a jumbled puzzle. This might look cool if you like avant-garde architecture, but for regular folk, no thanks. So, as the future unfolds at warp speed, let's embrace the wonders of AI in architecture. But let's also remember to balance its brilliance with our own human touch. Together, we can create a future where buildings are not just functional, but also filled with heart and soul. It's an adventure that's out of this world.
The conditions on this mysterious island might teach us how we can live on Mars one day. Devon Island is, to this day, the largest uninhabited island on our planet. It's located in the Canadian Arctic archipelago, and it's easy to see why people find it impossible to make a home here. The soil stays frozen throughout the seasons. The eastern part of the island is covered by a thick ice cap all year round. Summers here last for less than 50 days. And by summer, I mean that the ground is snow-free and the temperatures are slightly over 46 degrees Fahrenheit. Since almost no plants are growing here, there are no animals that could have adapted to these conditions. That's why scientists compare this island to what it would be like to live on Mars. In 2001, a project started here on Devon Island looking to discover how people might live and work on other planets, particularly on Mars. It's called the Houghton Mars Project and offered NASA scientists some unique studying opportunities. There are few options here in terms of logistics and transportation, and communicating with people living outside the island is also a bit more difficult. Specialists believe that if we can find solutions to live here, we might be able to do it on Mars too. Think of it as a home-based outer space boot camp. The Pitcairn Islands can be found in the middle of the Pacific Ocean. If you're a fan of adventures and remote places, this is the place to be. But you'll need to buckle up for quite the ride, since no plane has ever reached this place. The only way to reach the Pitcairn Islands is to take a 32-hour yacht ride. No wonder only 50 people are known to live here. Its history is really interesting too. A group of people settled here in the 18th century after a failed marine mission. To this day, all the residents of the island are descending from that initial group. Life's not easy here though. If they need to see a doctor, for example, they need to travel either to the island of Fiji or to New Zealand. Now let's head over to Mexico, where recent technology has allowed scientists to explore some fascinating cenotes, which were previously unknown. Cenotes are also called sinkholes and allow us to see subterranean water bodies. A team of archaeologists, cave divers, underwater photographers, and biologists came together to explore and document the extensive network of sinkholes located in the Yucatan Peninsula. One of the hotspots is located under the main pyramid at the Chichen Itza archaeological site. In total, scientists are looking to explore about 6,000 cenotes stretched across this whole region. The whole project is important not only because of the geological discoveries, but also because of its connection to the Mayan people and their culture. These recent discoveries revealed that for the Mayans, these cenotes weren't simple water sources. They dictated the way they built their constructions and had a huge impact on their spiritual lives too. The tallest mountain in the world is Mount Everest, sure, but it's been explored by scientists and tourists alike and doesn't hold many secrets. The mysterious Ganghar Puensem, on the other hand, is the tallest unclimbed mountain on our planet. The reason behind this unusual situation is not because of its remoteness or harsh conditions. Rather, because it's against local legislation to climb it. It's located in the South Asian territory of Bhutan, and the name of the mountain translates to the White Peak of the Three Spiritual Brothers. Local tradition dictates that mountain peaks shouldn't be available to humans and need to be left to the higher spirits. Mountains in this region can only be climbed up to 3.7 miles, but Ganghar Puensem tops 4.7 miles. For this reason, there's no official record of any human reaching the peak. Almost all of the previous expeditions have been inexplicably stopped at the midpoint. The next unusual spot should be on any travel enthusiast's bucket list, the island of Madagascar. For starters, it's estimated that about 90% of the species of plants and animals that are found here can't be seen anywhere in the world. But there's one small portion of the island that has baffled both tourists and scientists, the stone forest. It belongs to the Tsingy de Bemaraha National Park and features some unique limestone formations. They look like thousands of spiky towers that stretch hundreds of feet into the air. The distance between these formations can be anywhere from a few inches to the length of a city street. As beautiful as it is, it's really hard to get here. It'll take you a few days to get there from the nearest city. Once you get to the park, it becomes really difficult to explore, too. It can take a whole day to go across as little as half a mile. The word Tsingys itself translates to where one cannot walk barefoot. To visit the remotest village in the whole world, you'll need to prepare yourself for quite the journey. From the United States, for example, the easiest route involves a 15-hour flight to Cape Town, South Africa, followed by a 6-day boat ride to reach Tristan da Cunha. Or you could take a month-long cruise through the South Atlantic Ocean, whatever works better. Planning in advance is a must, since only 9 boat visits are made to the island yearly. It's just 7 miles long and right in the middle of the South Atlantic Ocean, stretching a mere 37.8 square miles. There are slightly over 200 residents, and they all farm for a living. They do have internet service, but it's really slow. The people living here speak a dialect of English that is used by the fewest number of people in the world. The town of Coober Pedy in Australia is partially underground. It all began back in 1915, when opal deposits were found in the area. To this day, the town is still the biggest opal mine in the world. People living here figured out that it would be more comfortable for them to stick to the underground, as temperatures above ground can reach 125 degrees Fahrenheit. So, the establishment now has underground stores and galleries. Coober Pedy is also home to the world's first 4-star underground hotel. North Sentinel Island, located near India, is another pretty remote place. Not because of the time it takes to get there or the climate, but because it's home to the world's most mysterious tribe. The population living here is estimated to be between 50 to 400 people and isn't known to have any contact with the outer world. This is mostly because locals don't really enjoy visitors and tend to scare them away, even harming tourists. So, to protect them and their obvious wishes, the island is monitored by the local Indian authorities. It's believed the tribe's people don't have any immunity from modern diseases, so being in contact with foreign people might actually be fatal for the locals. On these French islands, there are no native inhabitants. The Kerguelen Islands are part of the Antarctic lands and are home to just scientists that visit on rotation. At any given time of the year, there are no more than 100 people here, and they're mostly engineers and researchers. There's no plane to get you to these islands, and few tourists are known to have visited them. The island is covered in glaciers, and the soil here isn't friendly to plants or animals. But if you're curious about what this place looks like, you'll need both the money and the time to complete the trip. You can only reach the island by ship, which reaches the shores of Kerguelen only 4 times a year. It isn't cheap to stay in these islands, and you definitely won't find 5-star hotels here. The trip departs from Reunion, and it takes about 28 days to reach the first island. Half of the time will be spent at sea, so be prepared to cover over 5,600 miles of the Indian Ocean.
If someone begins to hear whispers and voices in their head for some reason, and there's no one nearby, perhaps this person needs to seek professional help. Unless they're in one of these places where sound illusions and auditory hallucinations are tourist entertainment. So the first of such places is in the small Spanish town of Santiago de Compostela. Here you can take a walk in a small park and sit on a smooth concrete bench made in the shape of a semicircle. No one's sitting next to you, but you hear someone whispering, "Hey buddy, how are you?" It's pretty creepy, but it's not a phantom. It's the girl sitting at the other end, whispering something into the concrete back of the bench. Sound waves move through the smooth surface of the arc and reach your ears. You can whisper something too, and the girl will hear you. This unique structure is called the Bench of Whispers. It was built in 1916 and immediately became a popular place for romantic dates. At that time, there were stringent rules regarding the communication of boys and girls before marriage, but this bench allowed them to communicate more closely, but at a distance. Come here with your loved ones and try it out yourself. Our next location is the center of the universe. No, this is not the place with the fastest free Wi-Fi, but the name of a unique point in the small town of Tulsa, Oklahoma. Stand in the middle of this brick circle and shout something. You'll hear your voice getting louder and its echo spreading far away. This place is considered an anomaly because, according to legend, if you blow a loud horn here, people standing outside of the circle won't hear it. If you don't have a horn with you, you can debunk this myth with your voice. Just scream loudly and ask people standing nearby what they've heard. Of course, they'll hear you, but your voice will seem pretty distorted to them. Some are sure this strange effect is created thanks to sound waves getting reflected from the round wall of a large flower bed installed near the center. Even though today is the 21st century and science has stepped far forward, scientists still can't determine the cause of this sound anomaly. Perhaps you can. We've arrived in the northern part of New York State, in the small but beautiful town of Lake George, surrounded by mountains and forests. And this city is built on a lake. Guess what it's called? Yes, it's Lake George. So besides the fact that this location is popular among fishing enthusiasts, thousands of tourists come here to scream as loudly as possible. Here's a young guy standing in the center of a concrete platform with an engraved compass and a cartographic image of the lake. He screams loudly, then leaves. It looks strange, but you decide to try it too. The sound of your voice is moving away and then returning to you as if someone hit it back with a tennis racket. You hear your distorted voice and scream again. Then you take a step to the side and repeat. This time, the scream sounds as usual. You return to the center of the concrete compass, right to the intersection of two lines, and scream again to hear the bizarre echo. But people standing next to you don't notice anything. To them, you're just a weird screaming person with an ordinary voice. Do you see that low semicircular wall around the platform on the lakeside? Perhaps sound waves resonate from it, which creates the effect. But why doesn't it resonate in other places with similar low walls? The answer may lie in the water and the mountains surrounding the place. What if sound waves change their shape when they hit the water and then the mountains? Okay, no one knows exactly what's going on here. Just have fun. Let's leave the beautiful embankments and parks and go inside the Grand Central Station in Manhattan. Here, among the noisy crowd, you can find a unique place near the domed intersection of the aisles on the lower floor. Press your ear to the smooth tile, and you will hear whispers and voices coming from the other end of this dome. These quiet sounds are so clear that you will hear them even through the thousands of voices of people passing by. Such an acoustic effect is created with the help of perfectly symmetrical shapes of smooth arches. They're made of a unique material patented by Spanish tiler Rafael Guastavino. By the way, you can enjoy his other works in different places in New York. Welcome to Echo Bridge, located near Newton, Massachusetts. This architectural work of art was built in 1877 as a part of a large aqueduct. Now it's an attractive place for tourists thanks to its unusual acoustic effect. There are several platforms under the bridge where you can go down the stairs. So go there and say something loudly. Your voice will be carried by a loud echo that can produce about 15 reverberations. Scream "hey" loudly, and you'll hear 15 hays flying off far into the forest. And if you produce an even louder sound, like a pop from a firecracker, then this place will repeat it about 25 times. According to one theory, the effect of the long echo is achieved because the sound is reflected between the arch and the water. Still, another hypothesis says that the unusual shape of the arch somehow enhances this sound phenomenon. Now we're in the small English village of Thurgoland. Among its attractions, there's an unusual tunnel with an acoustic anomaly inside. It was a railway line that connected Sheffield and Manchester, but it was closed in the 1980s. Now it's a bicycle/walking path. Inside, you can clap your hands and hear the sound lasting for about 20 seconds. Stand with your friend on different sides of the tunnel and try to communicate with each other. One word will overlay the previous one, and it will seem as if you're speaking with several people. The smooth concrete lining of the horseshoe-shaped tunnel and the 4,000-foot arc-shaped trajectory provide this reverberating effect. Even if you're not interested in acoustic tricks, you should still visit this tunnel because of its beauty and unique architecture. The sound of waves on the seashore has a meditative effect. Californian artist Peter Richards decided to amplify these sounds. He created a unique musical instrument called the wave organ. The artist installed it on the coast of San Francisco near the Crissy Field Recreation Center. This work of art consists of more than 20 long pipes made of concrete and PVC material resembling plastic. All the pipes go under the water and amplify the sound of waves beating against them. Gurgling loud voices evoke that calm, pleasant feeling you experience while watching a burning fire. You can enjoy it for a long time. Okay, we've learned about several acoustic anomalies and sound phenomena. Still, they're all created thanks to the joint work of nature and humans. So let's end our journey with a unique place where only nature produces stunning sound effects. We're in Sagano Bamboo Forest, Japan. This is an authentic place untouched by people, in which the wind and bamboo stalks create a real acoustic show. Dense thickets of the forest creak, crack, and beat against each other. And all this is accompanied by the noise of foliage and the wind. All this mix of sounds has a charming effect. Thousands of tourists come here with professional recorders and microphones to record this music. And this is the main problem of the forest. Too many people here crack branches, click their cameras, speak to one another, and thus prevent you from hearing nature. So come here early in the morning or find a place away from all those tourists. Lie down on the ground, close your eyes, and enjoy.
Let's check out some places that look like they're out of this world. Welcome to the vibrant, colorful world of Burano. It's an island in Italy. The first thing you'll notice is the striking and bold panorama formed by the rainbow of colored houses that adorn the island. Nowadays, Burano is mainly a tourist hotspot, with only a handful of locals calling it a home sweet home. The island is also home to the traditional style of lace making that's been around for centuries. Sure, you might find some cheap knockoffs in souvenir shops, but the real deal is handmade by a select few artisans in town. Anyway, you might be wondering why the Burano folks decided to paint their houses like in a Skittles commercial. The answer lies in the island's history. Let's rewind to the beginning. The first houses built on Burano were made of reeds and mud, and only later, thanks to the Romanization of the area, the houses started to be made of bricks. Yet, colors were not seen there until the birth of the famous lace industry, which brought an economic surge and fame to the island. The island was mainly inhabited by fishers. They experienced a lot of trouble during frequent winter mists. To solve this problem, they started painting the facades of their homes with identifying colors to find their way back home even in the thickest fog. Another theory suggests that different colors identify different families on the island, and some believe that the humidity and local women were behind the variation in colors, as they repainted the facades with paint they mixed from various sources. Let's head to another island. This one is in Japan, and surprise, it's ruled by cats. Aoshima has over 200 furry feline friends, mostly orange and brown tabbies and calicos, and they're all waiting to say hello when you arrive. You can stroll around the island with them, sit back and relax as they play and sleep, or just enjoy the peaceful waters. The locals feed the cats every day, so they don't beg for food. However, it's always nice to give them some cat food in a designated area, or play with them using toys to make them even happier. Aoshima wasn't always a cat island. It used to be a thriving fishing village where cats were brought to hunt mice. As fishing declined, the human population dwindled, but the cats remained and prospered. Some cat lovers discovered the island, and the rest is history. Thanks to the internet and word of mouth, Aoshima has become famous worldwide and is now a popular destination for cat lovers. Now, check out this crazy sinkhole on the Oregon coast near Cape Perpetua. It's called Thor's Well, and it looks like it's straight out of a movie. They also call it the drain pipe of the Pacific, which is kind of hilarious if you think about it. Basically, it's a hole in the rock that seems to swallow all the ocean water around it. Some scientists think it used to be a cave. This thing is a sight to see, especially during high tides or storms, when the waves go wild and crash into the hole. Just be careful, because you don't want to get swept down into the abyss. The next stop is Pamukkale in Turkey. It literally means cotton castle. This place is home to the most beautiful white water pools in the world, formed by thousands of years of flowing water and carbonate minerals. Pamukkale is steeped in ancient history and legends. People have been coming here for centuries to experience the healing properties of the hot springs. The story of a girl who turned into a stunning beauty after bathing in the pools is just one of the many tales that surround this enchanting place. The mineral-rich waters slowly drip down the mountainside, cascading down these mineral terraces into the pools below. The terraces are made of travertine, which is a fancy schmancy sedimentary rock that gets deposited by the mineral water from the hot springs. There are around 17 hot springs there, with water temperatures ranging from a toasty 95 degrees Fahrenheit to a boiling 212 degrees Fahrenheit. The water travels 1,050 feet to the head of the travertine terraces and deposits calcium carbonate on a section that's about 200 to 230 feet long. When the water gets super saturated with calcium carbonate, it spits out carbon dioxide and then deposits calcium carbonate on the surface. It starts out as a soft gel and eventually crystallizes into travertine. Cool, huh? In Myanmar, there's a surreal jungle village of crumbling temples called Nuang Ohak. Okay, so it's not the easiest place to get to, but trust me, it's worth it. After a serene boat ride that lasts about an hour, you'll walk through the charming little village. The floating market is where you can grab some fresh fish and veggies, and maybe even do a little haggling. Then, you'll see a couple of fancy new temples painted in bright white. They're super cool and all, but the real magic happens when you lay your eyes on the ancient crumbling temples that have been around for centuries. These structures have never been renovated. The intricate details of every temple and different Buddha statues are like a time machine, taking you back to the olden days. The whole vibe is just so awe-inspiring, it will leave a lasting impression on anyone lucky enough to visit. Have you heard of Colombia's Rainbow River? The name says it all. This place is a psychedelic burst of colors. The river flows, and it's like a liquid rainbow, with hues of red, yellow, purple, and more. The colors change depending on the light conditions, so you never know what you're going to get. The riverbed is covered with special plants, which make stuff pop with shades of red, and the waterfalls only add to the already epic view. Now check out this place called the Danakil Depression. This geological formation was caused by the continental drift of 3 tectonic plates. I mean, what are the odds? No wonder it's one of Earth's most unusual environments. You can find it in Ethiopia. Danakil Depression is known as one of the hottest places on the planet, and it's home to salt lakes, lava lakes, volcanoes, and colorful acidic springs. It's like a whole other world down there. So how did this funky place come about, you may ask? Well, as the African and Asian tectonic plates drifted apart, they left behind a huge hole in the ground. It's like Earth just opened up and said, "Hey, let's make something really cool down here." In addition to its wild geology, the Danakil is a hotspot for scientists studying the origin of life. There, they found the remains of Lucy, one of our early human ancestors dating back 3.2 million years. Plus, the acidic springs in the Dalal crater might hold the key to finding extremophile microbes. Those are organisms that thrive in extreme environments under high temperatures. Who knows what other mysteries this weird and wonderful place holds? So there's this beach near Fort Bragg, California, called Glass Beach. It's not because the sand is made of glass there, but because the beach used to be a dump site for garbage, including a ton of glass that was eventually pounded into tiny smooth pieces by the waves. You can't go around collecting that glass like some kind of treasure hunter, though. It's illegal. You'll have to leave it there for others to enjoy. The glass is slowly disappearing. It's getting ground down by the waves, and there are just too many tourists collecting it. So resist the temptation to grab a piece if you ever visit that place. Oh, and if you want to check out Glass Beach, there are actually 3 different sites where the garbage was dumped, but only one of them is adjacent to McCarrasher State Park. Do you recall any other funky places such as these? Go ahead and comment below.
One interesting thing that happens in map design is the so-called Baltimore phenomenon, or Baltimore effect. This phenomenon happens when a city or another object is left off a map because there's just not enough space, while smaller cities make the cut simply because there's room for them. The name comes from Baltimore, Maryland, which often gets left out of maps because it's surrounded by bigger cities like Washington, D.C. But on the flip side, sometimes smaller and less well-known cities like Alice Springs in Australia end up on the same map simply because there's enough space for them. Like at this scale, Alice Springs, which give or take 25,000 inhabitants, is labeled, but the huge city of Guangzhou, with over 14 million people, is somehow not. This phenomenon is more common on automated mapping sites, but it doesn't happen at every zoom level. On popular sites like Google Maps and other similar ones, you'll only start seeing Baltimore show up at certain zoom levels, like the 5th, 6th, or 7th zoom. Cartographers can tweak their maps to make sure they're useful and convey spatial information effectively, finding the right balance between showing important details and keeping the map clear and focused. The best maps are the ones that show key elements clearly, while still accurately representing the world. But Alice Springs is not the only weird thing on the map of Australia. Look at the time zone map. This 10.5 section looks a bit off, huh? Well, Australia is officially divided into 3 standard time zones: Western, Central, and Eastern. Australian Central Time aligns with UTC plus 9:30, with individual states and territories deciding whether to observe daylight savings time. Australian island territories and Antarctic stations contribute to the complexity of the time zones. Despite this, Australian time zones are generally easy to understand. In addition to the official time zones, there is an unofficial hybrid time zone called Australian Central Western Standard Time. This time zone is halfway between Western Time, UTC plus 8, and Central Time, UTC plus 9:30, making it UTC plus 8:45, a unique quarter-hour difference. Australian Central Western Standard Time is only observed in a small area in far southeastern Western Australia, along the Eyre Highway. The Australian Central Western Standard Time area includes settlements such as Cocklebitti, Madura, Mundrabilla, Eucla, and Border Village. Only a few hundred people live in this region, making it easier for them to agree on a non-standard time zone. Despite the lack of official approval, Australian Central Western Standard Time continues to be followed due to the significant time gap between Western and Central time zones, especially during the summer when South Australia observes daylight saving time and Western Australia does not. The use of this unique time zone can often lead to confusion, even amongst the locals. Eucla police, for example, operate on Perth's time zone, causing occasional tardiness to events such as community gatherings. Locals mentioned that in the past, Eucla operated on its own unofficial time, which made things simpler, before the transition to align with Perth time. They also face confusion as their location in South Australia does not observe daylight savings. The history of the Australian Central Western Standard Time dates back to the establishment of a telegraph station in Eucla in 1877. Although the exact origins of this time zone are unclear, it is speculated that it was adopted to avoid confusion at the telegraph station located on the border between Western Australia and South Australia. UTC plus 9:45 was historically utilized in Australia as a time zone known as Central Western Daylight Time. Certain roadhouses along the Eyre Highway in South Australia and Western Australia adopted UTC plus 9:45 during the summer months when South Australia observed daylight savings time. While not officially recognized by the authorities, the boundaries of this time zone are clearly outlined and often depicted on local road maps. 5 locations in Australia, including Border Village, Kaiguna, Eucla, Madura, and Mundrabilla, previously observed UTC plus 9:45. Currently, these areas operate on UTC plus 8:45 due to Western Australia's lack of daylight savings time. Australia is not the only example of weird time zones. China has a population of approximately 1.5 billion people, and it's the 3rd largest country in the world. Despite its vast size, China operates on a single time zone known as Beijing Time or China Standard Time. This unique time zone covers almost 5 geographical time zones within the country. At times, in some cities in China, the sun rises as late as 10 a.m. People often have lunch after 2 p.m. or even after 4 p.m. if they're not in a hurry. Since 1991, daylight savings time has not been observed in China. However, the region of Xinjiang, located in the western part of the country, follows Xinjiang time, which is 2 hours behind China Standard Time, and is considered an unofficial time zone. Nepal also has its unique time zone, as it operates on Nepal time all year round, without the use of daylight savings time. It's a bit unique compared to other countries because it has a UTC offset of plus 5:45, meaning that Nepali clocks are 5 hours and 45 minutes ahead of Coordinated Universal Time. This is only a 15-minute difference from neighboring India, where the standard time used to be the same until Nepal decided to set its own time zone in 1956. Now, let's examine the map of Europe. Great Britain, Portugal, and Spain are all located at roughly the same latitude. However, despite this, it's 1 hour earlier in Portugal and the UK compared to Spain. Why is this the case? In the 1940s, Spain was instructed to switch to German time, a directive that was accepted by Spanish authorities. Over time, despite changes in leadership, Spain remained in the same time zone, resulting in it being 1 hour behind its neighboring countries at the same latitude. But like many other countries, Spain sticks to daylight savings time. Greenland would rank as the world's 12th largest country if it were independent. but it's currently part of Denmark. The country has 3 different time zones. Most of it is 3 hours behind Greenwich Mean Time, except for only one town on the eastern coast, which is 2 hours ahead. Thule Air Base in the northwest operates on GMT-4, while the tiny population of Danmarkshavn sticks to GMT. Daylight savings time was implemented to give us more daylight during the evenings after work, which could help save energy by lowering the need for lights and heat. It was first suggested by Benjamin Franklin in 1784 to align waking hours with daylight and conserve energy, and was implemented in Port Arthur, Ontario in 1906. Since then, many countries have adopted the practice, though some regions near the equator or at high latitudes opt out due to minimal variations in daylight hours. In the United States, daylight savings time is observed almost everywhere, except in Hawaii and Arizona. Arizona's scorching hot weather makes daylight saving time kind of pointless. People there would rather get stuff done in the cool morning hours than sweat it out in the evenings. However, the Navajo Nation, which is autonomous Native American territory, sticks to the same daylight savings time schedule as the rest of the country. Even though it spans 3 states, Arizona, New Mexico, and Utah, they keep the time consistent across their lands. As for Hawaii, due to its tropical location, the amount of sunlight doesn't change much throughout the year. If Hawaii changed its time zone to UTC-9 during daylight savings time, the sun would rise at around 7 a.m. in June. This is because most of the islands are situated towards the west of the Hawaii-Aleutian time zone, and theoretically should be in the next time zone to the west. In the past, Hawaiian Standard Time was based on a different longitude than it is now.